Does Kingcold have a final form? And if he does, what does it look like? To be honest, there have always been a load of questions that surround Kingcold in his introduction, and the fact that when he arrived he seemed to bring more questions than he did answers. Wow! For those of you that remember the short stints of time that Kingcold was in the show, he didn't really amount to much. Other than the dub giving him an incredibly camp voice, his memorability really comes down to the mystery that surrounds him. But one interesting thing that people have always discussed was his ability to, or not be able to, mutate like his children. Or child if you don't count Cooler. Notably, when we first meet Kingcold, he's visibly huge in comparison to Freeza. So based on what we know of Freeza, this means he's either in his second form, or he's in a giant version of Frieza's first form. But as far as we know, based on the fact he never used his final form to fight Trunks, it could be his final form. But is it? Unhelpfully, our knowledge of Frieza's clan is pretty minimal. It's compiled with misinformation, mostly thanks to translation errors, and generally a lack of input. Yet noted in Daizenshu 7, they are considered the only two members of their race with incredible powers. But the Daizenshu are not perfect, they have aged pretty badly. What was true when they were written isn't necessarily the case now. Many people assume that Kingcold cannot transform, and truthfully there is a lot of evidence to support that. Being that he doesn't attempt to transform when he fights Trunks, albeit Trunks didn't really give him a lot of opportunity to do that. But with him attempting to blame Trunks' sword for his ability to slay Frieza, you would assume that if he could transform, he may not have bothered to, at the assumption that Trunks' sword being all that he needed to kill him. Meaning, should he take away Trunks' sword, there would be no reason for him to transform anyway, as he believed all of his power was in that sword. There is also the possibility that having just witnessed Trunks slay his son, why bother? Some misinformation about this is really important to clear up, and it's who is stronger, Frieza or Kingcold? Especially Kingcold in his second form and Mecha Frieza. The Funimation dub back in the day decided to say that Frieza was on his way to Earth, and there's an even stronger power level with him. But this was a dub-only line. By the way, that was paraphrased, might be slightly wrong, but the gist was the same. But this was a dub-only line, and actually in the manga, it only goes as far as to say that Kingcold is just another key like Frieza, and just describes him as another big key. That may be confusing, but get a load of this. Mecha Frieza is stated to be stronger than Frieza was on Namek, according to himself in the manga. And as ambiguous as another key like Frieza's or another big key may be, if Kingcold is anywhere near as strong as Mecha Frieza is, whilst presumably being in his second form, if he transformed into his final form, would he be weaker than Frieza still? If you consider how much Frieza's power multiplies every time he gets closer to his final form, to go from Kingcold's potential second form to his final form would have spelled absolute disaster for everybody on the planet. Having said that, it's somewhat unlikely based on the fact that everyone in the universe trembles at the thought of Frieza, but nobody really talks about his pop-pop. Beerus only ever talks about Frieza, Kaiosama only ever freaks out about Frieza. They're never freaking out about his dad. I would assume based on these facts that Final Form Kingcold would still be weaker than Final Form Frieza. And backing this up, we flash forward to the Broly movie. And at the beginning, Kingcold announces his resignation as leader and announces Frieza's assumption of his position. Ergo, he retired. Why? Well, logically, Kingcold is old and Frieza is more powerful. It makes sense. However, it could imply that Kingcold was once upon a time able to use his final form, but now due to old age, is only able to operate in his second form. This is possibly the most compelling answer. These things put together would likely explain the power difference between the two of them, and the reason why Kingcold doesn't transform. Especially given the fact that when Kingcold compresses himself into his previous forms, his first form, his second form, and third form, he is becoming weaker than he was in his final form. Frieza states this in the show. Final form is actually his original form, and the other forms are mutated to keep them under control, because simply walking around in his final form would create so much chaos and destruction that he just has to control it by being in his first form. Funny how he doesn't use it in future, but even after he fights Trunks, he tries to recruit Trunks to be his new adoptive son, and to rule a galaxy side by side. Kingcold knows that he's not got enough power to run the galaxy alone, or the universe, whatever. But once upon a time, he was. The counter-argument to this is that because Frieza and his father are considered mutants of their race, it could also just pertain to the forms that they take. Is it possible that Kingcold's anatomical traits are just random and not linked to specific forms, kind of like a creator character on Xenoverse 2? Toriyama did the original design for Cooler, who was similar enough to Frieza's appearance. However, there's enough distinguishable difference between their final forms to suggest that perhaps final forms aren't always the same. Of course, Frost doesn't look perfectly identical to Frieza either, even though his previous forms look similar to Frieza's previous forms. Chilled doesn't look exactly the same as Frieza's first form, or first form Frost, and the big difference however here is that they all resemble those specific forms. Final form Cooler does look more like final form Frieza, Chilled does look more like first form Frieza, Frost's first form does look like first form Frieza, Frost's third form looks like third form Frieza, and Frost's final form does look like final form Frieza and Cooler. These things considered, I think it is likely that Kingcold is in his second form, presumably to stay intimidating even though his power is diminishing in his old age, and that his body can no longer handle being in his final or original form now. This brings us to our last question: will we ever see Kingcold's final form? And truth is, probably. We all know that Super Dragon Ball Heroes loves to bring back old characters and give them new transformations. Game or anime, it really doesn't matter. And I firmly believe that at some point the game or anime will very well introduce us to Kingcold's final form. Perhaps rejuvenate him to a point where he can access the form, or even time travelling back to a period of time where he was more powerful and ruled in his final form. With Cooler having been given a golden form to his ultimate form, a golden form to his metal form, I think it's likely at some point we'll probably see Kingcold get some sort of treatment as well. Will it be in the anime? Possibly, but who knows what the future holds for the game. And with the Heroes anime going nowhere soon to our knowledge, there is always a possibility. Comment your thoughts on Kingcold in his final form in the comment section below. Make sure to give the video a like if you enjoyed it, and remember to subscribe for more Dragon Ball content in future. And remember to hit that bell for notifications because it really helps. So, until we meet again, bye!